Hey, it's David Thomas with Orchard Hills Church here in Noonan. So we appreciate you watching today. My father, Dr. Stacy Thomas, is going to be delivering the sermon. And today he's going to be talking about what makes God willing to answer our prayers. You know, he's going to be in Mark chapter 1. And the leper in that story asked Jesus, if you are willing to heal me. So why is God sometimes willing? Maybe sometimes he's not. Sometimes our prayers get answered, sometimes they don't. We're going to dive into that today, and I know you're going to get a lot of value from it. Stay tuned.
Amen. He is our King who is willing and able to save and to heal. He's the one that came from heaven, from a throne of glory to a cradle in the dirt for our restoration. In the darkness we were waiting, without hope and without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes, to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. What a Savior. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings.
To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died.
Thank you, Lord.
Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. And the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born, and the Spirit lit the flame. And this gospel truth of old shall not kneel and shall not faint. By his blood and in his name, in his freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise forever to the King of Kings. Come on, give him praise. He's worthy.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Brooke. Yeah, it's hard to see my former youth group here, kids of their own and doing their things, but that shouldn't really surprise me. I even had a grandchild of somebody that I married the other day want me to marry them, and I'm thinking, wow, how did that happen? So anyway, it does happen, and it'll happen to you if you live long enough. Mark chapter 1. You know, this is a very simple passage, and you've probably read it several times, and you've just glanced over it and thought, well, I don't really understand why he said that, but it seems that Jesus gave him a positive response. And so let's see what happened. Well, let me back it up and put it in context here. This passage is referred to in Matthew 8. It's also referred to in Luke, I think it's chapter 5. And so we get a different view from each one, but particularly in Matthew, he had just given us the Sermon on the Mount, announced the kingdom, given us the Sermon on the Mount, and then he starts doing. And so it was in his transition from telling them what it was to showing them what it is. And I pray this morning that we may also make that transition from just hearing sermons to living sermons, to hearing the Bible preached, to living the principles of the Word of God. And so let me go to the Lord in prayer real quickly. Father, I just ask you this morning to translate to us through your Holy Spirit what you want us to have. May we leave this place, and those that are watching be touched with your Spirit, not a man, but with your Spirit, your word into your glory, and meet the needs of this hour. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right. Now a leper came to him, imploring him, kneeling down to him and saying to him, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Then Jesus, moved with compassion, stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I am willing, be cleansed." And immediately you think, why would he not be willing? Why would God ever not be willing? I mean, surely, and we think about that, and we think, I never have a doubt about God's power to answer prayer, but I do have doubts about his willingness to do it for me. In reference to my context, in reference to my situation, in reference to my former life, in reference to my particular sins or my particular shortcomings, I can always figure out an equation while there is a possibility that he won't answer it. Right? All right. As soon as he had spoken in verse 42, immediately the leprosy left him, and he was cleansed. And he strictly warned him and sent him away at once and said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go your way, show yourself to the priest, and offer for your cleansing those things which Moses commanded as a testimony to them." However, he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the matter so that Jesus could no longer openly enter the city, but was outside in deserted places, and they came to him from every direction. Now, I want to give you actually 15 points this morning, and I'm not going to stay on those very long. But as I went through this, I just tried to glean, what can we gain from this? And I don't know why God laid this on my heart, but here they are. Number one, the Bible tells us in Romans 10:14, "How then shall they call on him in whom they've not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they've not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher?" And then he says in 10:17, "So then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God." Now let me ask you something. How did you get saved? How did you get here? Somehow, some way, somebody told you about Christ. Somebody told you about what was happening in a particular church. Somebody invited you to go somewhere, or your mother or your father or whatever, but somehow you got the message communicated to you, audibly probably, from a friend or loved one about who Christ was. First, you must hear of Jesus. Now we're going to have some implications of that at the end. Number two, what we believe of the power of Christ in the Bible and in the lives of the saints in the Bible must be applied to our particular case. Now, if you want to learn to pray, go through the prayers of the Bible. If you want to know how to touch the heart of God, look at those that have touched the heart of God. And what do? You look at how something happened in the Word of God and you apply it to your particular case. So here's what he said. I have heard that he's healed people and healed this one and healed that one. There's no record that before this that he'd ever healed a leper. But maybe if he can heal this person, a paralytic, then he can heal me, a leper. Have you ever did the math on that? If God can do it for somebody else, he can do it for me. Have you ever really thought about the fact that God really doesn't play favorites? He has his will, but he doesn't play favorites. If he did it for them, then he can do it for me. And this man concentrated on that. He concentrated so much that he was willing to go the next step. And that is, you must go to Jesus. Now, you don't understand what he was risking. Now, let's go back into the Old Testament and let's go back into the time of Christ. Leprosy. What is it? It is a disease that affects the nervous system. And what happens is it, first of all, formulates on the skin. And that's where it harbors. It multiplies from there with the killing of nerves, and it moves into the tissue. It goes from the tissue to the muscles, from the muscles to the bone, and even to the bone marrow, and then it attacks the lungs and everything else in the body. If you were certainly signified to have leprosy, you were considered the walking dead. There was no cure for you. Nowhere in the Old Testament do we see that. I mean, there was miraculous cures that God did, but there was no remedy. There was no physical, medical remedy for anyone to be healed of leprosy. It was a death sentence. So much so that they were giving all of these requirements there in Leviticus about how you treat a leper. And they were outcast. They were placed outside of the community. No one could touch them. No one could touch their clothes. No one could be around them. They must maintain 50 paces at all times. And if the wind was blowing, they must maintain 100 paces. They must keep their face covered, and they must put their hand over their mouth. If they ever came in the vicinity of anybody 50 paces away and shout, "Unclean, unclean." That was commanded. In fact, in rabbinic law, it was illegal to even address a leper, to say hey to them, or to address them in any way. I mean, they were isolated. They were rejected. They were outcast. And it was not illegal if one was coming in anywhere close to you, pick up stones and throw them at them. Because the last thing you want to do is catch it. So, with a little bit of COVID, it has a kind of a reminder of that in some ways. In a mild case, you think about leprosy. Now, he could have been locked up. He could have been stoned. He could have had a lot of things happen to him. But he risked every single thing to go to Jesus. Now, that was something. Now, we in this church don't realize what people risk to come to Jesus in other situations. It's getting that way. But My son Stephen was over in Palestine for about 9 months as a missionary from Southern Baptist Convention, and he was talking about, Dad, I never realized it. As I became friends with these Islamic people and going into schools and speaking to them and becoming acquainted with the teachers and all this kind of thing, one squared off with him one day and told him. He said, we invite you into our house and we want to honor you. And so, he's there. But it's a different story to accept your faith. If I accept your faith, then I'm isolated from my entire family. I'm isolated from the community. I am someone who is considered dead by those around him. Now that's serious for somebody that's in another faith that is so adamant and hard against Christianity. We take it for granted that it's very easy to go to Jesus, but it wasn't easy for everybody. And I think because it's so easy for us, that somehow it's diluted the power that Jesus brings to somebody's life. So this man went to Jesus. Who do you go to? You have a problem, something goes wrong, you just found out somebody's got cancer, something else has happened or whatever. What's the first call you make? Who do you dial? Who do you cry out to? What's the immediate response? That's one of the indications of somebody's salvation. That's a biblical thing. If you cry out, Abba, Father, in the midst of tragedy, that's a good indication that you are genuinely saved. Because there is this commonality and there's this connection with you that He feels what you feel. And you can cry out, Daddy, Abba, Father. And that was an incredible thing. But he went to Jesus. Number 4. You must know what you want. You remember what Jesus said to the blind men who kept saying, Son of David, have compassion on us. And they kept trying to shut him up. Y'all be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. And Jesus said, let them talk. Son of David, have compassion on us. And they were blind. Here they are, totally blind, and they're saying, Son of David, have compassion on us. And Jesus says to them, what do you want me to do for you? First 3 guesses don't count. We need to see. But Jesus wanted him to specifically ask for something. What is it that you need? Have you specifically come down to it to where you can make it known specifically? Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. Did you know this is the only disease that it's called defilement? It's uncleanness. The others are diseases. This is uncleanness. Because the person literally had those scales and those sores and all of that rotting on their body and everything else. And the reason they lose their ears and their nose and all that kind of thing is because their nerves are gone. They don't even know it. They're itching and they just scratch it away until the ear's not there. It is a terrible thing. And he said, if you will, you can make me clean. Wow. Now, he wanted it physically, but how many of us need it spiritually? How many of us need it morally? How many of us need it in our thinking and in the whole processing of life? Lord, can you make me clean? Clean of gossip, clean of slander, clean of greed, clean of covetousness, clean of greed, clean of everything, God, comparison and all those other things in life that just attack you. And you think you're clean, but in God's eyes you're not. You see, we like to categorize this. Well, I'm going to talk to you about that in just a minute. You must know what you want. Number 5, you must be honest with God. You know what he said to him? He said, if you will. He wasn't convinced God would. He wasn't convinced he wouldn't treat him like any other person treated him. He would justify God not healing him. He said, if you will. I'm not certain you will. I love that. God doesn't want you to impress him with your praying. There is no formula that is perfect. It is simple honesty with God. God, I've got every doubt in the world as to whether you will or not. And I know without faith it's impossible to please God. But I'm throwing the cards on the table. I'm telling you the truth. I don't know whether you'll answer me or not. I touched the heart of God. His honesty. He didn't know. But he knew he could. He knew he could do it. Are you convinced your problem's too big for God? You know, I see people sometimes, they'll come and they'll talk to me and all this kind of stuff, and they say, well, it's this. I don't really expect this. And I say, really? You don't think God can fix that? No, not really. What have you got that God can't fix? Romans 4:17. Dead things to life, and he calls things that do not exist as though they were. What problem do you have that creation and resurrection can't conquer? Be honest with Jesus. But this is the power right here. Number 5. He deferred to the will of God. If you can. In that was a resignation. It was a confident trust in God, but yet backing it was a surrendered will that if you can, if you will, then do it. If not, he was saying, I accept it. Now I want to tell you, there's nothing more powerful than the earth than that. A surrendered will to God. I have seen it over and over in life. I remember as a young kid, God just gave me this gift with children. I just loved children and played with them, youth, all this kind of stuff. And when I got married, all I wanted was kids. I wanted 7 kids. I told my wife, I said, when we were dating, I said, don't marry me if you don't want a bunch of kids, because I'm going to have 7 of them. And don't sign up for that if you don't want it. Because I'd seen the movie Shenandoah. I know that sounds so shallow, but I saw all those kids sitting around that table with Jimmy Stewart, and I said, that's what I want. A bunch of kids. And for 5 years, we couldn't have kids. And buddy, I was getting bitter. I was really getting pushed with God. Here I was at seminary every day. And I would go and paint houses and do this stuff, and I would see the way these kids were treated in some of these houses, because I was painting a lot in the Mill District and where it used to be, and it was lower income homes, and I was seeing these kids come in the way they were and all these kind of things that were happening. And I said, God, these kids, these parents don't even want these kids. And I would give anything to have kids. What are you doing? Well, I was running around the track one day, right there in the shadow of Southwestern Seminary, and I ran by this guy that was dragging his feet with cerebral palsy. And I mean, I ran by. And I heard him as I ran by, and he said, how you doing? I kept on running for a minute. And I stopped. I said, I'm fine. How are you? And he started talking to me and with his steps and everything. And I said, I appreciate you talking to me. And he acted like I'd done him the honor. And I started back running. And I started to weep. I said, here this guy is. He can barely get 1 foot in front of another. And I am so bitter about the fact with a perfect body out here, in my opinion, running fast around that track. And yet, I am so bitter with you for not giving me something. You know what I told God? I said, if I never have children, I'll never bring it up to you again. Right here, right now, I die to it. I'll just be a minister to other people's kids, and maybe that's what you called me to. You'll give me the grace to do it, and I'm done with it. Well, my dad had a heart attack right after that. I rushed back home to Atlanta. And while I was here, Sue Ellen called, and it was the night that J.R. got shot in Dallas. And it was back when you had operators. She called long distance, collect. And she said, this is Sue Ellen. She said, oh, yeah, who shot J.R.? And she said, no, this is for real. This is a collect call. This is really Sue Ellen. You don't realize how big Dallas was in Dallas-Fort Worth when they were shooting Dallas out there. It was the first, nighttime soap opera type thing that everybody was caught up in. And so finally she got through. Said, you're not going to believe it, but I'm pregnant. It was amazing. About 5 weeks previous to that, I had said, or 6 weeks, I had said, God, I resign to your will. And I won't ask you again. You know, I felt very honored to have Dr. Joel Gregory as my preaching professor at Southwestern. That was a great honor. Here is a man that at about 40 years old took the pastorship at Dallas, First Baptist Dallas. I mean to tell you, he knew Greek like the back of his hand, taught Greek at Southwestern. He knew Hebrew the same way, and he had a voice that would surpass Moses and Charlton Heston. I mean, he spoke and you listened. And I was in his preaching class. Buddy, I got shined up the day I was to preach. I had that suit on, perfect everything. I had those points. I had those Greek references, those Hebrew references. I was going to dive in there and do it all that kind of, and I did. I preached my sermon. But the next day, we had a guy in our class. Again, cerebral palsy. He had those metal, can't even think of the term. The metal, what is it? Crutches. There you go. Thank you. He had those metal crutches that you put your arms through and that you hold on with the handles. And here he is going up to the pulpit, and right before he makes that first step, there was 2 steps up to that pulpit, and he falls flat on his face. And I was sitting close to the front. I jumped up. I went, grabbed him. Another student came over, and we're picking him up. He said, please let me be. No, I'll get it. I'll get it. I said, you're sure? He said, no, it's okay. So he got up. He finally got to the pulpit. And he said, you boys, you feel sorry for me. I get it. He said, you stand up here straight, and you do all your hand gestures, and you do everything perfect. He said, I can't do that. But he said, God has gifted me with a need that makes me so close to God, I fear, and he didn't say it in pride, that some of you guys will never know. And he said, because I have this, I have to depend on him so much more. And he said, you pity me. Really, you should envy me. I was weeping. I thought that was the most powerful sermon I'd heard in our class from a life like that. He had surrendered his rights to a perfect body, and he had counted it joy. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie with Mark Wahlberg, Father Stu. Same story. Same kind of thing. But a resigned will deferred to the will of God has such incredible power, you have no idea. Now, how do I know that? Jesus said, I live to do the Father's will. He never did one thing that wasn't the Father's will. He knew what it was to do somebody's will. And when somebody defers to Christ's will at oneness with the Father's will, and they're totally resigned to whatever God wants. Now, it's amazing to me, there's certain branches of religious people that'll tell you that if you say, if thy will, it destroys the power of your prayer and it brings doubt into it. That is, well, then check with Jesus. If it be thy will. About the cross, remember? What he said 3 times? Father, not my will but thine. And so that power comes through. And there's this oneness with the Father's will and the Son's will and the Holy Spirit empowering that produces virtue, power, and answers in a way that only those resigned to the will of God will ever find. Deferred to the will of God. Number 6. Through the contact of laying hands on Christ and the Father and the oneness of that will, that power and virtue was communicated through appeal. What do I mean by that? Now, this is where the rubber hits the road in praying. Hebrews 2:8 tells us that everything's been subjugated, everything has been placed under the power of Jesus Christ, but then it says, but we do not yet see now everything placed under him. You say, well, that's a contradiction in words. No, it's not. Everything is placed under, but we don't see the totality of that. 2 Corinthians 10:4 says, pulling down strongholds. Pulling down those things in our lives that keep us from touching the heart of God when it comes to the will of God. I'm not saying you can pray all day long. If it's not the will of God, it's not going to happen. Romans 8:37, more than conquerors through him that loved us. Now, I far fear that we don't get enough answers to prayer because of this lack of perseverance and getting to the will of the Father through the Son, through our praying, that we don't get our prayers answered. Number 7, Christ's power came through his word. He spoke the word. He said, I am willing, be cleansed. How did he create the world? Light be. Everything that was created in 1 John was created through Christ. Let there be light. And all he had to do is speak the word. Psalms 107:20. Those 4 different scenarios. The guy that got sick, and he spoke his word. He sent out his word, and his word healed him. So the word. If you don't know the word, what did he say to the Pharisees? You do greatly err. You don't know the word, so you don't know the power of God. It is incumbent, it is necessary. It is a requirement that we know the word of God to be able to get to where this guy was. But he didn't know much about the word of God, and there wasn't much of the word out there. What do we really know? Because that's how we know everything we do know. We don't know anything else but through the word. Number 8, Christ understood the connection with sin and disease. The world did not. Now, I want you to get a hold of this. Miriam, Moses' sister, because she complained and criticized Moses' authority, God struck her with leprosy. Uzziah was struck with leprosy when he went into the Holy of Holies. Throughout the Old Testament, it had been a curse, a condemnation, a receiving something from doing something bad. And so that's the way everybody saw it. You know, there are a lot of Pharisees out there that if you got something going wrong in your life, they like to connect the dots. They like to say, well, that happened to you because you did this, or that happened to you because you did this, and that happened to you because you did this. There's a restaurant that I go to a lot. There's a server there, and she's had cancer, and she's has a wig now, and all that kind of thing. She's had some 40 different treatments, and all these things that have happened to her. And my son came in the other day, Joseph, to get some things. We're working on something. I sent him up there to get a couple barbecue sandwiches, and she was crying. And we used to eat with her all the time, and he said, called her name, and he said, what's wrong? She said, well, somebody just gave me a book that told me the reason I have cancer is because there must be some terrible sin in my life. And he explained to her about Job. He explained to her about Christ and Paul. And I came in the other day, just last week, or week before last, and she said, I want to tell you something. She called me over. She said, your son blessed me. I was really upset somebody had done something mean to me. And I really took it to heart. I was trying to figure it out. I was blown away by it. But your son blessed me. You see, there's a lot of Pharisees out there because they don't recognize that what Jesus was doing is he was calling all sickness and disease sin, but it was not personal. In the day ye sin, ye shall die. We're all inheritors of sin that causes death and certain kind of physical defilement and certainly spiritual defilement, but they never connect that dots. The Pharisees didn't. They thought because they kept the law and they did everything perfect, they didn't walk so many steps, they didn't carry a load of wood, and they did all these kinds of things, that they were so much better than this guy that had leprosy, but actually he was so much closer to God than they ever would be or will be or had been. What a tragedy. Be careful judging folks about their position in life and saying, you must have done something to get there. Christ never did that. Number 9. Yes, sin does lead to isolation, rejection, uncleanness, and death. But we're all walking dead people. Now, I want to clarify that for just a minute. Ephesians tells us that we're dead in our trespasses and sins until what happens? Christ makes us alive in him. Everybody has a leftover of that death, that flesh, and that's what Romans 6 and 7 is about, that we don't have to be under the dominion of sin. We don't have to live that way. There is life for us. There's victory for us, but it's only in Christ's life, his life, that he's given to you. Number 10, got to move fast. The leper was separated from everybody but God. Separated from everybody but God. You know, I found people all the time, people that think their sin is unforgivable. A guy that tried to commit suicide, he told me God will never forgive me for that. I had to explain to him that's not true. Had a gay guy one time, God can't forgive me for being gay. That's not true. Had a guy say, I forgot what his case was. It was something, it was, in his eyes, it was an unforgivable thing. But let me tell you something. There's only one unforgivable sin. That's the blasphemy of the Holy Ghost. And what does that mean? That means when you deny his knocking on your heart and he gives you a voice that this is your time and this is your opportunity to accept Christ, and it's clear as day, and you deliberately say no. Well, that's unforgivable because you walk away from it. That's on you. It's really not on God. Number 10. Jesus could touch sin and defeat it and never be defiled by it. Don't you think they freaked out when he touched that guy? Wow, you're going to be eaten up with it. But because Jesus had no sin in him, that defilement couldn't do anything to Jesus, and his purity and power went into him. just like it's gone into you through the Holy Spirit. Number 11, the man never expected a touch. You know, I bet that guy had not been touched in so long that when Jesus reached out to touch him, he coiled and thought in his heart, don't do that. Because he'd been separated from so long from people. You know what Jesus gave him? He gave him more than he expected to get. 2 Corinthians 2 and 9. 1 Corinthians, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has entered into the heart of man the things that God's prepared for them that love him. Ephesians 3:20. Now unto him that's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. What do those verses mean? That means that I can so outdo what you ask, you would never believe it. But you got to ask. Number 12. The proportion to which Christ possesses us is the proportion to which we will be effective in touching sinners. If we're not really one with Christ, we can be rocking with them and doing what they do and all that kind of thing. We'd be pulled down. But if you're really walking with him and you're really talking with him and you're really living with Christ, your effect on them is not going to be your defilement. It's going to be their undefilement as they come to Christ. Number 13. Touch people, share their Christ and what he has done. That's exactly what he did. Christ told him not to do it, but he did it. Christ tells us to do it, and we don't do it. Isn't that something? You know, I just saw the movie Run the Bases. Same people, I think, that made Facing the Giants and all those movies. The marriage movie, I forget what that was, but War Room. Those movies. They made another movie, Run the Bases. I just saw it. And it's a great story. It's about a coach. And because his brother dies and he makes a commitment to do something religious in front, and he became he won the championship 10 times at a high school because he had such integrity as a coach. But before the game started, he would get down on his knees, and then he would get up with his Bible, and he'd run the bases. Well, he went to another school, big school. He kept doing that, and then the chairman of the athletic department said, "Man, you're embarrassing the school. What are you doing? Stop it." And so then they turned him over to the police, and the policeman was waiting on him, and he got finished, and they wrote him a ticket. And they kept writing him a ticket, and they said, "If you keep doing it, we're going to have to lock you up." And they locked him up, and they put him in prison. Which it was illegal to do something religious on this public park. And he was disobeying the law. But he said, "I've got to obey God, and God's told me to do this." And it changed the entire town in the end. And he gave this speech out in front of everybody there at that game. He said, the reason we're in the mess we're in as a nation is because people have become mute. They don't speak up anymore. They don't say who they are. And they don't live for something. And therefore, we just keep backing up and backing up and backing up and backing up. And I thought, more powerful words couldn't have been spoken. That's exactly where we are with the laws in this country right now. When I look at what was going on just 50 years ago and what was allowed and what's going on today, it's because the church has been silent. That's it. Now, lastly, your problem has larger ramifications than you can ever imagine. You know what the ceremonial cleansing was for leprosy? You went to the priest, and you had to bring 2 birds. And one bird, they killed it. And they took the blood from that bird, and they put it on this other bird, and they let that bird fly away free. Now, what did that indicate? Christ. He is the bird that is sacrificed for you. And because of the remission of sins in his blood, you get to fly away free. Unlike him, he did not. What you're going through, you think your problem is only about you or your family or whatever? No. It's affecting a lot more people than that. God has a plan that is bigger than you could ever imagine with that particular leprosy that you have. Why does he give it to me? Why doesn't he take it away? Why did he do this? He has a reason. Trust him. I close with this. We're all spiritually sick and we're all dying because of sin. Even those people that say that God expects all of us to live a healthy, perfect body until we're 110 years old. I want to ask how many of them have lived to be 110 with a perfect body? Because of sin, we're dying. Doesn't mean God can't heal. And there's only one remedy that can save us, and that's Jesus Christ. He has saved us to have a body that will never suffer sin as long as eternity exists, which is for eternity. You say, well, is he willing to save me? Well, I don't know. 2 Peter 3:9 says he's not willing that any should perish. 1 Timothy 2:4, he says he's willing that all men may be saved. Yeah, he's willing. All you have to do is come to him. Let's pray. Father, we come to you this morning thanking you, Almighty God, that our sickness, our sin sickness, was healed at the cross. And Father, for people that are experiencing all kinds of different leprosy, could be cancer, it could be COVID, it could be anything out there, God. And they're saying, if you're willing, God. Father, would you help them with that? Would you show them the way with that? Would you give them the grace to know those things that they have that don't seem to go away, that don't seem to somehow or the other find resolution? There is a bigger reason than they could ever imagine. And let them resign to the will of God. Not stop asking, but ask and say, if you're willing, Almighty God, will you do this for me? And Father, we'll thank you and praise you, for it's in Christ's name we do pray. Amen.
Thank you so much for watching today's sermon. We hope you get blessed from that. If you want any more information about today's sermon or any past sermons, you can certainly contact us through our Facebook page. Just feel free to send us a message. Also, we always welcome you to like, comment, and share this sermon with others. You can give any gifts, tithes, or offerings to the church. You can find us on PayPal, which is books.ohbc@gmail.com, or on Tithely at Orchard Hills Church. Once again, we appreciate you tuning in. God bless. We'll see you soon.